on your side and to avoid big mistakes while you try to process your logs through your SIEM and so on. So my presentation is when I was looking for an interesting title, I decided to name it a walk through log hell, because yeah, basically managing log files is really a hell. It can be a very nice mastery. And I'm also trying to find a nice background, so it's a foggy road in the middle of the night. So it's exactly the feeling that you can have when you start to investigating log files and try to process them in the right way. So let's activate my window. Oops, sorry. Sorry for this. My dual screen is making some mistakes. Yeah, okay. So who am I? A few words about myself. So I'm Xavier Mertens, also known as XMe on Twitter. I tweet a lot, often way too much, but I try to tweet interesting stuff, always regarding security most of the time. I'm based in Belgium. I'm freelance during my day job, so I consider myself more as a blue teamer. So it means that I try to keep my customers safe, basically. I like to track bad guys. I like to hunt for bad people. I like to find new type of malware, to do some malware analysis also. If you follow the SANS Internet Storm Center, probably you read my diaries. So I'm a handler for a few years now. And so I try to share as much as possible my knowledge and to try to improve the internet. And I'm also a co-organizer of the Brucon Security Conference. So yes, basically being a blue team, I have to play with logs all the time, basically on a day-to-day basis. So I have my own infrastructure. I'm also involved in very big infrastructure at some customers. And yeah, basically we need logs, because when we need to track the bad guys, the first information that you will collect, those information are based on log files, basically. So it's really mandatory stuff. The idea of this talk, well, from my experience with SIEM, I'm working with SIEM system for a lot of years. I don't remember exactly how many years, but it should be between 12 and 15 years. I remember that when I started to work as a consultant for a company before being freelance, it was a long time ago. One day my boss came to me and said, "Oh, Xavier, by the way, we have some customers asking us if we can do some log management, some SIEM stuff for them. Does it look interesting for you? Do you agree to investigate this?" And I say, "Yeah, well, why not?" So I jumped into this, and yeah, basically I liked the idea immediately. So I played with a lot of different SIEM products. The goal, of course, of the presentation is not to talk about products. I will not mention, or try to not mention, some vendors, but the idea. So with all those years playing with SIEMs and log management, I had the idea to share my nightmare stories, my mistakes, because I made mistakes and I'm still doing mistakes almost every day, all the time. And we have to do mistakes because we learn by doing mistakes. So the idea was to really try to compile a lot of nightmare stories to prove you that it's not easy to manage log files, but also that's well, I will say the negative point, but also the good point, the plus point is also to try to provide you some tips to improve your log management solution. That's the idea of this talk. Of course, I don't know of amongst all the attendees who is already involved with log management, so I have to introduce briefly what is log management. So let's start with a few slides regarding pure theory regarding log management. What is log management? So a quick definition. I'm a lazy guy, so it's just a dumb copy-paste from Wikipedia. So log management is an approach to deal with large volume of computer-generated log messages. What's important is In this case, in this sentence, you have large volumes because you will, if you start to play with logs, you will see that you will collect a lot of logs, a lot of gigabytes, of terabytes of data per day, depending on the size of your organization. And of course, they are generated by computers. So it means that they're automatically generated, so they can have multiple formats, they can be processed through multiple protocols, multiple techniques. So it's quite complex. And if we split a log management solution across different layers, we have the first one is the log collection, which means that we have to read and to access to the log files and a certain place. It could be in the database, could be over the network, could be an open protocol like syslog, could be a closed protocol like some vendors are using. Then the idea of this log collection is to centralize everything doing log aggregation. Centralization is a key point because when you need to investigate an incident, today it's almost impossible to connect on all the different systems running on a network. You have multiple firewalls, reverse proxies, ADs, Unix systems, multiple appliances, LDAP, maybe NetFlow collectors. So can you imagine, as an incident handler, if you need to investigate something, you have to connect on 10, 20, 100 devices to fetch the correct and to grab the correct information. It's almost impossible. So the centralized log file, the centralized database is a key point. Of course, we need to implement some long-term log storage and retention policies, depending on some requirements, based on your business. If you are working in the bank, if you are working in the healthcare sector, if you are working for a factory, a telco, a provider, then you have to implement log rotation. You have to implement log analysis. So it means that log analysis, you can apply it in real time because you need to generate alerts, but you can also do log analysis on demand when you need to investigate an incident. So it means that you could be asked to process the logs for the last 6 months, because when you have to investigate something, often the incident occurred so a long time ago, a few weeks, a few months ago. So it's mandatory to have a good retention and to be sure to keep all the evidences. You can also consider a SIEM like some kind of Google for logs. So sometimes when you try to hunt, you don't know what you're looking for, but you just type some keyword, you look for some noise, some smoke signals, and so on. This presentation, normally, the first time I made it, it was live with a lot of people in front of me. So I had this slide because I don't know if you are confident with SIEM technology. So, but the idea I always like to people, please, do you have a SIEM and do you consider yourself as if you have a good knowledge of SIEM? So usually you have to raise your hand. I can have a good estimation in the audience how many people are working with SIEM today. But of course, no, thanks to the COVID-19, we switched to live online trainings and live online presentation. This slide is more irrelevant. What's funny with SIEM, so as I said, I play with SIEM and I try to follow the new product and the new trend and so on. And usually you always listen to the same classic sentences in seminars, in conferences, when you attend a vendor presentation. Basically, it's always like this. Wow, our SIEM solution can ingest 15K EPS. So an EPS is events per second. So yeah, our solution is able to ingest a lot of logs per second. It's crazy. Yeah, our SIEM indexes 30 gigabytes of data per day. It's wonderful. Also, we get a massive amount of alerts a day. And basically, all those guys, they just, you know, the classic stories when men are talking between them. Mine is bigger than yours. It's the same for SIEM. So people, they like to present the size of the SIEM. They like when I'm talking to SOC managers, they like say, yeah, I have a license for this amount of EPS. I ingest a lot of stuff, but basically it's not the most important. The most important is the information that you collect. The information that you collect must be the right one and must be easily processable, easily accessible. And I don't care about the size of the SIEM. If the SIEM ingests only 200 megabytes a day, but if I have an incident and I know that in these 200 megabytes per day, I have the correct information, I'm a happy guy, so simply. Also, I like to mention the story of a manager. It is a true story. I was working for a customer, and every morning, the manager visited the SOC just to say hello. And the manager says, hey, morning, guys. How are you today? No incident, everything is fine. And people at the SOC usually say, nothing, sir, everything is green, all fine. And the manager had always the same reply, okay, do I have to be happy or scary? It's exactly the feeling that you can have with a SIEM and log management solution, because you have no alerts, it's fine. But what does it mean? It means that indeed you don't have any alerts, so you are safe, between quotes, or the SIEM is not properly configured or is broken and does not collect information to generate properly the alerts. It's a good question. Regarding log management, so we have to face when you start to deploy a log management solution from scratch. Trust me, if your boss asks you to deploy a log management solution from scratch, you will be very happy because you can start from zero and you will be able to really deploy the solution as you want. It's an amazing project. But we have, when we have to deal with log management, we have two approaches. The first one is opportunistic, and the second one is based on use cases. And they are completely different. Why? In an opportunistic approach, basically, by opportunistic approach, I mean that you collect everything. So it's a good point, because you collect everything, so you are sure that if something happens, it will be stored in the database. So this solution, the opportunistic approach, is perfect if you have to do incident response, because you know that if a user logged at one time on the system, the information, the event has been stored in the database. Being a hunter, I like to hunt, I like to track bad guys and so on. It's also the perfect environment because you have a huge amount of data and you are sure that in this amount of data, you will find something interesting for sure. You will. You don't know how, you don't know when, but you will. And of course, this approach has negative points. First, it will consume a lot of resources. Just think about disk space, bandwidth. Resources means also the people, because you have to maintain this. So you need a lot of SOC people, security analysts, to maintain this huge amount of data. You may feel a constant flood of events. Remember what the slide that I presented a few seconds ago? Yeah, my SIEM is able to ingest 10K EPS events per second. So it's constant flood of events. So the system is running at full speed all the time. Sometimes you can have the feeling to search for a needle in the haystack. You don't know. So it's nice to hunt, but when you don't know what to hunt, it's a nightmare, because if you need to track the bad guys, you have to know how the bad guys are working, what the techniques they use, how they try to abuse computers and so on. So sometimes if you don't have skilled people, they don't know where to start the search. You need to constant fine-tuning. Think about optimization of the I/O of the database, or adding more disk, optimizing the bandwidth, because the goal, of course, is not to use the complete bandwidth of your network to get events. So you have probably to implement some quality of service and so on. So it's a constant fine-tuning. And finally, the most important, I think, from my point of view, you have a false impression of security. because you know that you have everything. You say, yeah, I'm fine, everything is locked, but it's not because you have everything in your database that you will find the right information at the right time. At the opposite, we have the second approach, which is based on use cases. The positive points are, first, it's business oriented, which is amazing. Because when you start to deploy your log management solution, of course, you need some budget, you need some resources, you need servers, you need maybe 1 or 2 people, you need to ask the help of the sysadmins, the network admins, and so on. So it means that it has a cost. The goal of the use case is to think about a few use cases. What is, or what information, what kind of alerts is mandatory in my business? And based on this, you will deploy only the collection of logs that will solve your issue. For example, if you have you are working in I don't know, an example in a hospital, the medical information, so about all the patients, are really are the key for an hospital, are very important. So you should be notified immediately if there is a data breach, if you have some data, some connections, you see some secret injections, some database which are uploaded outside the perimeter, stuff like this. So you have to use use cases. Another positive point, because you collect only the logs that are mandatory to solve the use case, you control the resources. So you limit the amount of servers, you limit the bandwidth, the disk storage that you need, and you reach the return on investment. And which is very nice from a management point of view, because if you get a green light to deploy a SIEM, if you fulfill the return on investment, so it means you fulfill the use cases as soon as possible, it means that the management will be happy, and probably they will open more budget, they will open more resources for you, and will grow your platform. But of course, on the opposite, the negative points, we have some missing logs because you don't log everything. So if you need to investigate an incident, maybe you will not find the logs because it's too late, or you never start to collect them. You can have the impression to be blind. So you feel also disappointed because, yeah, I don't have all the logs and I'm missing this, and it's a slow start. So it means that instead of just collecting everything, indexing everything in the big database, you will have to start slowly, define the use case, then based on the use case, select carefully all the systems that you will collect the events from, and so on and so on. So you start slowly. If you have questions, I forgot to mention this, you can ask them via the GoTo training platform. I'm keeping an eye on the window with all the questions. If it's a quick one, I will try to answer immediately. If it's a bigger one or more complex one, I will review them at the end of the presentation, because we have a small Q&A section. So if we have a few minutes left. But of course, regarding these two approaches, the ideal solution is to have a mix of both worlds. So basically, if you put everything on a timeline, you have to do like this. First, you start, so it's a bottom-down approach. First, you start with a few use cases, only a few of them. Really, the cases which are very important, very critical for your business. Based on this, you learn the tool. You learn how it works, because you will make mistakes, you improve it, and you fine-tune it, and so on. Then you can add more use cases to increase the platform. You can demonstrate to the management that, hey guys, it works. You know, we were able to detect this, and this, so it's the system, the project is successful. Then the management will be happy. Be happy means you will get more resources, you will log more and more and more, you will add, and you will smoothly switch from use cases to opportunistic approach, and then you will be able to do the gold mine, I would say, well, from my point of view, to do some hunting and react in case of positive alerts returned by your by your hunting rules. So you have to mix both in to be able to catch a lot of interesting alert stuff and so on. Of course, all of this process, it's not a tool, it's a process. So forget about vendors telling you that you just deploy my box, you connect it to the network, power network, you deploy sensors, they will feed automatically the box, you will get automatic alerts and so on. Forget this, especially in log management. So it was a quick introduction regarding all those techniques, very, very brief one. Now we will dive into the nightmare stories. Now this part will be more fun. First, important remark, all the stories that I will explain, starting from the next slide, I face them personally because I made mistakes. Via a colleague, via a friend who told me, oh, by the way, do you know what we had an issue last week and something? So I tried to collect and to compile all those nightmare stories, but they are true stories, trust me. And very important, no SIEM was harmed in the making of this slide deck. Very important. So we did not break stuff. First stories, nothing is in place. Okay, it's nothing related to SIEM and log management, but yes, oh, I forgot. The first time I did this presentation, it was at the end of 2019. We are now in 2020. I forgot to update the slide, sorry. So yes, it still happens in 2020, simply no logs. From time to time, I visit customers because they contact me to do some investigations. And of course, when I arrive on site, my first question is, guys, provide me some food, provide me some logs. And sometimes you don't have any logs because they don't have any solution. Today, I'm sorry, but there are plenty of solutions that are available for free. You can deploy an elk stack. You can deploy a Splunk, which is also with a small license for free. If you use Microsoft Azure has a very nice basic log management system. You can have everything in your Azure console. So the fact that having no logs today in 2020 is a nonsense for me. So you have to log everything, but it still happens. Trust me, it still happens. Important, when I say that there are free solutions, it's like open source solution, nothing is free. The tool is probably free, but people will have to invest some money, some time into the deployment and of the solution, of course. The second example is a completely misunderstanding of the tools. In this story, basically, I was visiting a customer, and again, it was for an incident. I was doing some incident management, so I asked for the log files, and the customer was very happy to tell me, oh, yeah, I have log files. Okay, have a look. This is my console. Everything is logged. Okay, nice. But it's nothing related with the log management solution in itself, but the customer did not know how the tool was working, and the tool was a firewall, and so the firewall was logging only dropped connection. So it means that I was completely blind because the traffic which was used by the bad guy to do the bad action during the incident were authorized traffic of over authorized protocols. So it means that I was completely blind. So you have to know your tools and to understand how they generate events, when they generate events, and to be sure that to collect everything which is relevant. For a firewall, okay, logging drop packets, drop connection is very nice, but you have to log everything, because just think about the HTTP, HTTPS of SMTP. If you don't know that this IP address or this server tries to connect to this IP address over HTTPS, because, for example, a malware tried to download the second stage payload and so on, you are completely blind. So you have to know your tools. Very important. Number 3, don't trust your sysadmins. It's not the job of the sysadmin to decide what they will log and which kind of information they will send to your SIEM or not. I faced a situation a few years ago when a rogue sysadmin was able to alter the log files at the source. So it means that he tried to remove evidences that he made a mistake. In this case, it was not a secret. Well, it was not a secret incident in the sense of a malware attack or a real rogue sysadmin, but the guy made big mistakes and tried to delete the evidences. It's not the job of the sysadmin, and I already had. I can't remember how many meetings I had with different teams, Windows admins, Unix admin, network admin, and so on, and I was fighting with them because it's usually all the people, they try to keep the control of their baby. So if you talk to an Active Directory, to a Windows admin, his goal mind is the Active Directory, and he keeps the control of his own Active Directory. It's his own baby. And when you need to change some settings, because sometimes you have to change settings, the configuration. I will give you a practical example. If you need to log DNS, well, I don't know if it's still the case today, because I'm not an expert in Microsoft's environments, but a few years ago, when you need to log all the DNS resolutions performed by an Active Directory, you need to run the DNS service in debug mode to generate a flat file in the file system, and this flat file was indexed by your SIEM solution. So when you explain this to a sysadmin, a Windows admin, and you say, oh, guys, by the way, you have to enable to run this service and to run it in debug mode because it will generate a new file and so on, they will just kill you. They will say, why? We will never do this. So it's not the role of the sysadmin to decide. It's your role, the security teams, and the key point in this case is to get the management support you. So you must have the support, the management, and the management will talk to the other team, say, guys, those people are responsible for the SIEM, and so you have to implement what they ask. Don't trust your sysadmin. The next one, today is not tomorrow. Logs value may change in time. What does it mean? Maybe today you will have a server which is not very critical inside your organization, so you will not log all the Windows events, or will not forward the syslog events to your SIEM solution, to your log management solution, because, well, it's not an important one. So we try to reduce the amount of data that we store, because remember, you are working with use cases, or you try to reduce the size of the platform to reduce cost. So you decide to not log those events. But a few months later, a product manager decides, oh, we have a server which does almost nothing today, so let's use it and let's deploy a very important application on it. If you forget to activate the log management and to activate the log forwarding or the log connection of this server, you will lose information, because what was not critical at time T will maybe become critical at time T+1, T+2, T+X, and so on and so on. So the logs value may change in time. Also, depending on your business, you may have new requirements. So you have also to follow the rules. If you are working in a business where you have compliance requirements, you have to keep the rules updated to be sure that you comply with the requirements. Otherwise, when you will get the visit of an auditor, the auditor will ask you, okay, guys, show me your logs, where are they? Oh, yeah, but since 2019, there is a new revision of the requirements, and now you have to log this, but you don't do that. So today is not tomorrow. So keep this in mind. It's a constant process, and you have to review logs all the time. You have to be sure that you collect enough information to solve your issues. Log yourself. Avoid logging yourself. I faced this myself, so it's a true story. So basically, in one deployment, I was collecting a lot of NetFlow stuff, and I forgot to put filters in my NetFlow, and basically in my NetFlow collector was logging all the flows generated by the SIEM solution and all the clients running on the servers. So it means that basically I was generating myself new events in my SIEM. So basically, what's the status, the result of this? You explode your license, you explode your storage, you have bad performances, you have noise, a lot of noise inside your server when you search for give me the top 20 IP address generating traffic on your network. Basically, the top 5 will be your SIEM solution. It's bad. So what you have to do is usually a best practice is, of course, to use to apply filters to not collect the different flows related to the SIEM management, to the log management solution, sorry. But a good idea is also to use a dedicated network, an out-of-band network. So it means that all the traffic between the collectors, the indexers, and all the components of your log management solution must be run on the dedicated server. So first, you will not mix business traffic with management traffic and SIEM traffic, log management security traffic. And also, in case of issue like this, you will not flood your bandwidth with plenty of non-relevant flows. Because keep also in mind that sometimes you will have to collect data from a server located far away from a main site, maybe with a restricted connection. You will have to collect logs from a cloud instance. And just keep in mind also that think about the business model of the cloud infrastructure. What they do, they bill you based on the resource that you use. So, for example, if you have a look at the billing sheet and Amazon is billing your CPU cycles, your bandwidths, your storage, and so on, especially bandwidths, you have different prices if it's incoming traffic, outgoing traffic. If you made a mistake, you will generate a lot of traffic and you will also explode your cost at the end of the month. So avoid to log yourself. Another one, the OSI Layer 4. It's also a very bad story that I faced. And this one, it took me a few hours to find the solution. I will just give you briefly the context. Again, when you deploy your log management solution, you deploy it across multiple networks. So at a certain point, you will have routing protocols involved because you will have some servers running behind firewalls, a partner behind a VPN, and so on. And in my case, the bad boy was Docker. I'm a big fan of Docker, and I deploy almost everything in Docker today. And I had a big Docker server running a lot of Docker containers. And this server was connected via a VPN to a log management solution. And you have to know that every time you deploy a new Docker, if you deploy a new application, if you don't specify a network, Docker will automatically assign a new network to this application. And by default, it's 172.16.00/16. And when you create another one, it will use 172.17, 172.18, and so on and so on and so on. And the issue in my case, it was my VPN was running on 172. I think it was .18 something. And so at a certain point, I created a new application and Docker created a new network and changed completely the routing on my Docker host. So it means that my VPN was not available anymore. So the routing changed. And of course, guess what? Impossible to get events on my log management solution. So when I was monitoring some stuff, I decided to do some lookups, and I say, oh, but I don't receive any events since 2 days from this host. So I checked, I restarted the collector, I checked a lot of stuff, And only a few hours later, I just discovered that this stupid Docker was using the same network as one of my VPN, so the routing completely changed and the packets never left the server. So when you deploy the log management solution, again, an out-of-band network could be a very good idea, or you have to configure properly the range of IP addresses. So you have to keep in mind how is working your infrastructure, the switching, the routing, and so on and so on, because you can also face routing issues and you will lose packets. And of course, to add some an extra layer in this nightmare, the traffic was sent over syslog. Syslog being based on UDP, it means that simply the server was sending UDP packets to one of the Docker, and all my traffic was logged. So even it was impossible for me to recover the data, and I had a gap of a few days. Raw index, another one, and also a classic one. When you start to deploy your log management solution, it's the same for every solution that you use. It could be a free one, a commercial one. They use indexes. Basically, an indexes, you can compare this as some kind of a sub database, and it will help you to keep events of the same kind under the same index. For example, on my infrastructure, I have an index for syslog events, I have an index for net flows, I have an index for web servers, I have an index for firewalls, I have an index for threat hunting, I have an index for DNS resolution and stuff like this. And the good point about indexes is first, you can define retention policies different based on the index. So you see, for example, my firewall logs, I keep 6 months of history, my DNS 5 days, my firewalls 1 year, this kind of thread hunting log files only a few days. And it's also a way to improve the search, because when you search for some interesting data, if you specify search only on this index, you will speed up the queries because it will look only on a specific set of data. But you have to know that there is also a default index. It's like a default route on TCP/IP level. So when the system does not know where to store data, it will use the default index. So just imagine that you are a big infrastructure, big company, and you have plenty of firewalls. So you create an index containing all the events of your firewalls. It's very convenient because you can do some reporting for all the firewalls from only one index, from one place, a central place. But if suddenly you configure a new one, or a colleague or a partner, a consultant makes a mistake and does not specify that the index for this new firewall must be sent to the index called firewall, they will be sent to another one. And it's not an error for the SIEM, for the log management. It's just a configuration, but it will work. So it means that index will be fulfilled with data, but not the right one. So when you will investigate an incident or you will do some reporting, you will lose data. Because for performance reason, you will say, okay, every day I'm running a dashboard containing all my top events from firewalls, all the top speakers, the top drop protocols, the top blah, 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 whatever you want. You will lose information, you will miss information. So be careful about the index. You must use the correct index all the time. Default configuration is also a big issue. Keep in mind that default configurations will never return relevant information. Never / most of the time, honestly. I will give you a practical example. I was working for, it was years ago, for a big customer who had a very big SIEM deployment. It was a famous name, a very big player. And this customer had to be PCI compliant because he was managing credit card information, so he had to be PCI compliant. So he told to the vendor and say, okay, dear vendor, I must be PCI compliant, blah, 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 you know, and the vendor came and said, What wonderful! We have a PCI compliant package. So it means that you just install it. Yeah, first you need to buy it, of course, a lot of money. Then you install it, and by default, it will automatically generate you reports about all the PCI. I'm not a PCI guy, so I don't know how many bullet points I have, how many controls I have, but for every control that you have to keep in mind for PCI, we have alerts, we have reports, everything out of the box by magic. Yes, except that the vendor forgot to specify that to do this, the PCI package took into account the PCI tag put on the assets. So it means that the customer forgot some assets and he had to review all the assets belonging to the PCI environment to be sure that all those assets had a tag PCI attached to them. Otherwise, the PCI component package will return nothing because he expected, so again, he expected that some tags were put on all the assets belonging to this environment. If you have no tags, it means that no alerts, everything is green, everything is fine in a better world. So, or again, if you implement such kind of packages, it's nice because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but don't forget that you have to prepare the environment. And by default configuration, you don't have this tag in place. So default configuration can be dangerous. Bad decoders, also very nice. No. We don't use IPv6 often. When you talk to Sysadmins, when you go to a new customer and you talk about the infrastructure, so you deployed IPv6? No, we don't use IPv6. So they wrote regular expression to extract IP addresses like the one I put. So it's just a regular expression to extract an IPv4 address. And suddenly you see in some logs that you have indeed nice IPv6 IP addresses because by default or a sysadmin decided to open, they put an IPv6 tunnel also on your LAN today. Even if people say, if you don't disable IPv6 manually, if you don't say, okay, please shut down IPv6, IPv6 is running internally on your LANs, and it's the default protocol. So if two servers, they have to talk together, if IPv6 and IPv4 is available, they will go over IPv6. So when you write decoders, so when you implement new rules to catch events and so on, be sure to write them properly and to know your infrastructure. You have to know what's running on your server. You have to know what kind of application you use, what the version of the application and so on, because otherwise you will lose information. In this case, the log file that you see on the screen is a simple example from an Apache log file, but if you just try to catch IPv4 IP addresses, the decoder will not work, and it will just silently drop this event, and you will never see this event decoded in your SIEM. And if the bad guy is using IPv6, he will be blind. So bad decoders is also a key point. Misconfiguration, it's a classic stuff. Again, I faced this a few months ago at a customer, big configuration, everything was redundant, everything. Firewalls, load balancers, switches, everything. But they made an issue that when they configure, I don't know why, but when they configure a cluster of appliances, the configuration was not synced. So basically, they decided to run the configuration in active-passive setup. So it means that one of the devices was just present in case of failover. It was running fine. We got events in the SIEM. Everything was fine. And suddenly, one day, we were investigating something and no events from the appliance. Well, so we called the guy and said, guy, we have an issue because we don't see any events coming from this appliance. And basically, they did a test and they switched to the failover node just to do a regular test to be sure that it was working. Yes, the failover worked, but the configuration was not synced, and the failover devices was missing the configuration to forward the logs to the SIEM management. So basically, misconfiguration So it happens often because networks today, they change all the time. And you have to keep in mind that misconfiguration will occur, basically. They will occur for sure. Next one, search loops. This one, I'm sorry, but this one, shame on me. It's really a shame on me. So basically, the idea that I had is just to create an alert when a specific term is seen in your logs. So I was tracking a bad guy, and I was expecting the guy to do an action on the server. So I created an alert. Well, no, it was not on a server. I was expecting an email. Sorry, I was expecting an email, and I put a real-time alert on the system. When I see this word, this specific word in the subject, just send me an alert. So I knew that the guy was doing some activities, was active on the network, and so on. Nice, you see. So that's the goal of a SIEM. You have logs coming in real time, you create an alert, so you know immediately it will pop up a message, you will get an SMS, you will get a message on Slack, an email on the dashboard, but you will get notification. In this case, I just send me an alert by email, so I was able to track the guy. But the mistake that I made was, I will show you on the screen. I created an alert, and the alert was, the subject was mail from, I will say, blah, blah, blah.be. And I said, so every time I saw a mail from blah, blah, blah.be, send me a mail. And I don't know if you see the two red rectangles. So the first one is the alert, mail from blah, blah, blah.be. And the mistake that I made was below subject. I put in the subject of my email the name of the alert, which is mail from blah, blah, blah.be. So guess what? The first time the guy was active and start and generated my alert, oh, it worked. I received an alert. But the log management solution sent me an email. So the log management solution was checking the log files of the SMTP server. So it detected a new email containing blah, blah, blah.be. So I get another email, which was also sent to the mail server. And guess what? And guess what? And big loop. So I was flooded by emails. The mail server was overloaded. The log management solution was overloaded. It was really a nightmare. And my mistake. I felt really dumb, but shame on me. It was my fault. So everybody's making mistakes, and search loops is also a common issue. You can also have gaps in logs, so multiple times. So in multiple example, I mentioned that we were missing logs. And gaps is also a common issue. So when you check your logs and you see that you have some holes because you don't receive events for a specific amount of time, and to protect again, it will happen for multiple reasons. And to get rid of this, or at least to get notified, is just to create an alert when a gap is detected, which is not so easy, because what's a common gap? If you have a server which is quite inactive, you can have a gap of 2 hours because no activity occurred on the server for the last 2 hours, so will not get an event. For another one, a firewall, if you don't get any event since 15 seconds, it could be critical. So fighting against gaps in logs is quite difficult because you have to analyze and you have to fine-tune all the gaps and the detection, I would say, per device or per type of device, because otherwise you will get also false positive alerts. Upgrades. This one is also a real one. I will never mention the name of the vendor, but basically the API changed after an upgrade. So basically you use an API to fetch events. So it's running perfectly. So you have your SIEM, your log management solution, fetching events through the API. And suddenly another team decides to do an upgrade. They upgrade from version 1.x to 2.x or 3.x, I don't know, whatever. And the API changed. So the calls that you are doing to the API are completely broken and you are missing slots. Also a classic issue. And particularly, I like this one, the reused event IDs. So a vendor decided to reassign old event IDs to new events. So basically, if you create an alert on the event ID 112, for example, because this one is very critical, but it means that you probably will never get it because it's really a critical one. So 112, nothing. Then you upgrade the vendor, you upgrade the appliance, you upgrade the OS, and suddenly you get flooded by a lot of events 112 because the vendor decided to change the ID, and this one was, of course, a very popular one. And so you have to investigate why it doesn't work and so on. This is also a true story, which was reported by a friend. And basically, when he told to the vendor say, yeah, but because we had to optimize the way we distribute the event ID, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was a mess. Another one, I think is the last one because we are running almost out of time. Number 15, the lack of SIEM. SIEM is a very important topic. SIEM means Common Information Model. Without explaining in deep how it works, just think about, read the first line, SRC underscore IP is not source, is not SRC IP, is not IP. A common issue when you search for events, if you don't have common information model in place, is some people, they will extract information from log files and they will say, okay, this IP address, I will store it in the field source. This IP, another one will say, this IP address, I will store it in the field IP. In this one, another one will use underscore, with underscore, without underscore, with a dash, without dash, and so on. This is a very common issue, especially when you deploy apps coming from third-party developers, because all of them, they try to implement as they want the name of the fields. Some of them, they say, yeah, I like to use SRC underscore IP because I use also DST underscore IP and so on and so on. The result of this, it's a mess because when you will search, when you will do some investigations, you will search if on your daily basis you use IP as the source IP or SRC IP as your default field. You will use this one in your queries, but you will miss probably a lot of interesting events because they don't contain the same name for the field. So the common information model is very, very important. And one of the top vendor on the market today, they have some kind of an app store where developers can post their own applications. And if today, if your application is not compatible with the common information model, the application is rejected by the vendor, it's not accepted. And I think it's a very good idea. So lack of SIEM is a critical issue too. I don't know why there is 15 and 17. I don't know. There is a gap in my slides. SOC fatigue is also an issue not directly related to technical issue of the SIEM, but if you don't deploy your SIEM in the right way, it means that you will generate a lot of alerts. You will generate a lot of false positives. Could be also a lot of true positive, but a lot of alerts. And basically, you will reach the SOC fatigue. So it means that your people will not be motivated anymore, will not be attracted will not be aware when something happens. Most of the time, when I was visiting SOCs at customer, you point on a dashboard and say, hey guys, did you see that on this dashboard, this number is in red? You have a lot of alerts, so you have a number in red. And most of the time, the people, yeah, we don't care because it's like this for 6 months, so it's normal between quotes. It's quite bad. So SOC fatigue could also be a nightmare story. If you reach this, you have probably to review how your SIEM is working to try to reduce the amount of data generated on a daily basis. So that was a quick overview of all the nightmare stories, all the bad configuration, all what may happen in your SIEM solution. Of course, there are plenty of them. I try to keep this presentation updated, so if you have nightmare stories, feel free to share with them. I will be happy to have them in the slides, or to remove some to improve the slides and so on. A few gold rules to complete the presentation. Gold rule number one, most of the time you will face issues, you will discover them, misconfiguration, gaps and so on, when you will investigate. So you have to implement rules to perform self-monitoring, example, to detect some gaps. So you have to implement self-monitoring rules. If you did not receive any event from this server for this amount of time, generate an alert. It's a very interesting rule to implement. The second one, remember that you can work on use cases. If you work with use cases, implement test scenarios to validate them. For example, what we do at the customer, we have a rule to notify when we have suspicious domain activity related to suspicious domains. So what you can do, you create a fake domain which does not exist, and you try to resolve it once a month. And if you did not detect the resolution of this fake domain once a month, you trigger an alert, and this domain is only known by the SOC. So it means that if you don't receive the alert, you generate another alert, and it means that the use case is broken for a reason A, B, or C, I don't know, but something is wrong. So implement test scenarios to validate the use cases. Playbooks. So you know that if you are working in a SOC in incident management, most of the time you rely on playbooks. So it means a playbook is a description, a complete description of how to handle this kind of incident. In your playbook, reserve some time to review and update the rules in your log management. To do this, so to help to improve the creation of rules and the alerts, my recommendation, Sigma, is a very interesting tool which based on text files is able to generate rules for the most common SIEM on the market, which is very nice. So it means that it's very easy to read. You see that you have something in English with real words, and based on this, you can create your Sigma rules, you can add them to your playbooks, and you can implement them in a very nice way. Use case reverse engineering. Why I call this reverse engineering? Because if you use use case, basically you know the goal to reach. For example, I would like to be notified when I see this kind of data sent across the internet, so outside of my network. And to do this, you have to do some reverse engineering. By this, I mean that you have to learn and to try to find all the components which are involved in the processing of this data, and log them to be sure to not miss anything, and log only those ones. So that's what I call this use case reverse engineering. That was my last slide. So we still have a few minutes for questions. I see that there are some questions. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Let me review the questions. So question from Evan, first one. I will try to expand my window to see all the questions. Because otherwise it's not very easy. Oops. Long question is no window. So, what do you do when you have a situation where you are missing logs, SIEM broken? How do you proceed? Well, the first is to find who is responsible for this. If the problem relies on your system, so because you manage the SIEM, it's your baby, I would say, it's up to you to solve the issue. Maybe the disk is full, a disk crash, network outage, patch issue, stuff like this. If you are missing logs, but by investigating, you see that something changed on the server, for example, or an admin kill the process. For example, some admins, they say, well, what's this process hunting all my memory, all my CPU cycles on the server? I will just kill the process. The process was the events collector. Of course, we'll be in trouble. So in this case, I would say my recommendation is not to fight against them. So the goal is not to hail at them and say, oh guys, you are stupid, what are you doing, and so on. Try to be constructive and try to explain them why it's important to keep this system running, this process running, and so on. But of course, I would say if you have an incident like this or you are missing some logs, I would like to, my recommendation is to apply something like the incident handling lifecycle. So you have to find the issue and you have to implement the controls or to implement more protections to not face this situation again in the future. That's the goal. You will have issues. You will face issues. You will have big troubles. But if the same troubles are recurring and you face them once every 6 months, there is a big problem. You face the issue, you find why, you fix it, and you are sure that it will not happen again. Tipu in slide 15. Thank you. I will change it. You mentioned collecting key data points. How do you address challenge of collecting key logs from application without flooding system with too much noisy, low value data? It's a good question. I don't have a practical answer like this. It really depends. I would say think about the use cases. To avoid being flooded, start with a use case and do, as I just explained, do the reverse engineering of your use case. So based on the result that you expect, try to find on the system, on the infrastructure, and list all the systems that are involved in this process and what information is relevant to be able to solve this use case. It's my best recommendation. The next one, you mentioned some testing. Do you recommend certain in-state validation queries? And yeah, exactly. So I think that when you post this, I did not mention to write the scenario. So to have some scenario in place to test your rules. You have to test your scenario to test your rules. So if you are monitoring domains, test using a specific domain. You can also have a specific system account that you will never use. You can use some kind of you create an account and you automate the login of this account once a week, once a day, once a month, and if you don't see that this account logged on your system, you generate an alert. So you have to write scenarios to protect you against all those mistakes. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My pleasure. So it's just in time almost. So I hope that you enjoy it. If you would like to discuss this further, you can always join me by email, on Twitter, on the Slack of SANS Fire. I'm present. You can contact me through the Internet Storm Center. So for me, it's over. It's time to go to bed almost. And yeah, see you at another event, another presentation. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.